look at Sri Lanka's current situation, I think there are several major problems. Those are uh, the uh, the one of the major problem is the education delivery of the education, and another one is the pending electricity crisis, as Ceylon Electricity Board Engineers Union forecast in 2024, and also the increasing cost of living in the country. And I think on the other hand, we can also see the major problem with regard to the uh, the maintenance and the increasing of one's income. So together with the cost of living, the educational matters, the electricity supply, and the cost of and also the income support, and also we can say fifth one is the government decision to suddenly transfer from chemical fertilizer to carbonic fertilizer. So I think these areas the government must look into and give a solution, because now, for example, we can see when we take the education sector, and also other sectors like the cost of living, the income level, maintenance and increasing the income level, and the educational system during the pandemic, and also the carbonic to chemic carbonic fertilizer policy, and also like the other uh, problems with regard to various food supply in the country. So I think the government must not go into a one extreme solution, like, and but rather go on a like a without going into extremes, go on a middle path. That is the teaching of the Gautama Buddha. Because in any, now for example, if you take education, how to streamline the education system, it's a major issue. Because since once earlier it was in English medium, then the languages were changed to Sinhala and Tamil medium, then the public exams began, and then there was a question of the syllabus being upgraded, not upgraded, and as a result, the educational standards falling, and then the university admission became issue, because unwanted people got into the universities, and then the also the popular schools and the rural schools, the differentiations came, uh, and then we can see, as a result, the British American education got started in Sri Lanka, like Edexcel, International Baccalaureate, and University of Cambridge, and courses, and also the private colleges offer diploma programs and foreign affiliated degree program. But then the pandemic came, then the whole the foundation school, primary school, secondary school, and university education became a major problem. And I think in these situations the government cannot go on a one extreme policy, but rather it must balance and do. So like now, say for example, when it comes to education, well, the international school children, now that is University of Cambridge exams, Edexcel exams, international baccalaureate exams, and the children who follow those syllabuses, they have a lot of income, their families, and they can sustain income, education through the online method, because they already have the laptops. Even before the pandemic, they had the laptops, they had all the communication, broadband, and they were in towns, and they are other issue is they know how to avoid the harmful effects of internet, and they won't fall prey to negative side of the internet. Like, they won't waste their time on the social media. They know not to pursue the pop-up advertisement. They know how to stop them. They know how to keep the chat lines on a side, and they know how to do, because they are used to the system, because they are mostly from international school children. They know how to avoid these negative things and get their education, because their parents have funded their education. It's not the government. when it comes to public school, government funded the education, and government gave the education free. So the children took it for granted, and they did not study well, and they were not under pressure from the parents also, since parents were not spending for the children's education. But when it comes to international schools, private education system in the international school like Edexcel, Cambridge International Baccalaureate programs, foundation, primary, secondary, their parents were pressurizing them. They were pursuing, and they wanted the children to get good grades and get qualified and get into jobs, because they were spending a lot of money. So there was some accountability from the parents towards the children, since parents spend money and they work hard to earn those money, and then they spend. So they won't allow children to play around. They very strictly supervise the children's education, every aspect they supervised. So because of that, we can see those children, they have the facilities also, because their parents only funded the education. Parents had to cut off their other expenses and spend, or they have to increase their income to support the children's education. They invested on laptops, broadband, fiber lines, etc. for their children, and they spend a lot of money to buy the textbooks. So because of their accountability and their spending, they took care to make sure that the children don't play with education and they don't get into unwanted things. So because of that, the international school students knew how to avoid harmful effects and oblige the parents' requirements, and they accordingly pursued their studies. And somehow, even during the pandemic, with all the problems, they pursued education, because their parents only give the money to them. But when it comes to public schools, government, from uniforms to public meals to the tuition, the school fees and the exam fees, education, everything government gave free, and the parents did not spend anything for the school children's education after all. So they did not supervise. They let the government do it, even though they were their own children. The families who had their children going to public government schools made it a point, okay, government, you do this, we are not responsible for this. Then what happened? At home, parents did not supervise, and children used phones, and they had missed calls. They pursued them, and then they got into unwanted exploitation. And they pursued, because of this lack of supervision, especially after the pandemic, due to the social media, they took control, because public school children were not exposed to social media that much before the pandemic. But after the pandemic, with the online education, without the parents' supervision, since parents don't spend money for the public school education, parents don't spend anything, only the telephone or the internet bill they would have to pay. Government did everything free. This is a negative side of the education system, pre-education system, especially during the pandemic period. As a result, the children were not supervised, and they exploited the social media, and their cultural degradation took place, and they did not study. They did not commit to study, because they took it granted from home, since they did not have to go to schools also. At least in the schools, in the classroom, the teachers supervised them. So here there's nothing like that, and they also did not study, since parents also did not take responsibility. Then government spend everything, and they don't spend, parents don't spend anything, so they were not taking any responsibility for the education. So I think in this case, especially the pre foundation school, the kindergarten, Montessori, they are the worst, because they don't have any access to online. They cannot do, because they cannot know, they don't know how to do the online education. So it all collapsed. I think under these circumstances, there has to be a new solution. The only solution is the government must not go into extremes to education, that to say the whole country go for online. You can't do it, because most of the public school children and the parents don't commit funds to their children's education, since government already offered everything free to them. That is why most of the educated people protested when the government offered free education, saying people just waste money. Those who get the free education take it for granted. But however, since they went to the school, somehow they got the education. But these days, during the pandemic, through online, giving free education, there's no supervision at home, and parents can't afford to invest on laptops, everything. And also, if you give phones to them and say laptops to them, they are not used to that system. It's new to them. So not like international school students who already had laptops. Every international school child had already had a laptop before the pandemic. They know how to avoid. They were trained on how to avoid the bad side of the internet and make use of it for their studies, especially because their parents were strict on them, since they spend money for their children. But here, parents don't spend money for children during the pandemic, right? Government keep on spending, but the children are at home. There's no supervision there. So this is why the public education, free education collapsed during the pandemic. So government must, not go into extremes here. What the government must do is let the, let the parents have some commitment, because since children are studying at home, without the parents' commitment to their children, it's impossible to make them study. They will get addicted to phones and get unnecessary things, immoral activities on internet and phones. And also, besides, they are new to this education system, the public school system, children, not like international school children who know about this matter. So I think the government must charge like a fee from the parents now during this pandemic period, not giving this education free for primary or secondary school up to A levels, grade 1 to 12, 13. The government must charge the parents fee to make parents more committed to their children's education, because if not, at home, parents don't supervise. Let the government do everything. It's free. We don't care. Let that attitude they have. This is why a lot of people protested when the free education was given, saying that when you give things free, no one take it seriously. Especially during the pandemic, since they don't have access to schools, they never take it seriously and they do unnecessary things using online education here. And also we know there were mass classes with thousands of students in popular tuition cities like Maharagama, Nugegoda, Kiripatgoda, Kadawat, all cities. So in order to avoid, because government offered free education, parents did not spend, and everything was given free, and they took it for granted, the parents. And then children who went to school did not study, because their parents were not telling them to study at home, because parents were not spending for their children. But international school parents were spending for their children. They forced them to study at home, because otherwise it's a waste of their money. Because when they grow up, they have to look after their parents without being a burden. That's why international school parents spend the money for the education of the children by paying exorbitant school fees. Still, they pursue the children's education well at home, right? Even not so brilliant children who are going to international school studied during the pandemic and became brilliant. I have a lot of examples. But the public school children who are so brilliant ended up as very bad during the pandemic period. So to put this in correct place, government must initiate a school fee for every month from every parent of a public school children. Let them commit. They know when they pay only. Otherwise, they take it for granted. Okay, it's free. Okay, we don't care. And then children don't study. And that's why they went before the pandemic to mass tuition classes, and they got into immoral activities. Now it's more during the pandemic, during at home. So government must now change this policy a little bit and say every parent must pay for their children's education. Let them pay. Don't give them free everything. Then they don't commit during the pandemic period. They know the bad side of not having education. So they will pay. And the government must request them to pay a tuition, school fee, a good standard fee. Then only the parents, because in Sri Lanka's culture, parents are concerned about education more than anything. For anything they will spend if it is education. So let them pay it then now, because they don't go to schools. Their uniform cost and washing and traveling cost is saved. Their food cost, so everyone is at home. So let them pay that money to the government schools, and thereafter government schools, let them get the fees. And and that payments coming from the government school parents will then motivate them to, since they are paying, it's not free, they are paying, they will look after their children and ensure they properly study, whether it's online or if they don't have online or broadband, well, let them study through textbooks, let them be given printed notes, and let them submit the assignment to the school, and then that way you can make sure. And not going to make sure like extreme, but let them who have the phones and who have the because especially studying through the phones, it must be under strict parent guidelines, and also all parents first of all must pay for their children's education to government school a school fee similar to private international schools. Then of course parents supervise their children, right? Because they pay money. Otherwise, they don't supervise, they take it for granted. It's given free. Anything given free, Sri Lankans don't take seriously. So, in those circumstances, once the parents pay money, fees for the public schools, then of course government can allow access to even mobile phones, because parents will then commit towards the child at home. If not, when government give free, children misuse the phones. They don't study. So let a combination of method. Those who can afford, let them continue with the online. Others who can't, let them use private tutors visiting home, and others let them be given printed notes through assignments and do the education. So this combined approach would solve this problem without going into any extreme. That's why the Gautama Buddha also said, don't go into extreme. Government went into extreme by offering free. Then it became a mess. Nobody took it seriously. Then now even it's a further extreme, because it's still free, but the parents collect all the money of school uniforms. They don't have to wash, they don't have to make uniforms, they don't have to travel, they don't have to spend for school fee, school other events. All this money, parents just spend. They don't care for the children's education. So that's why the government must charge a school fee similar to international schools from these parents now, because anyway they save the money during the pandemic. And the Sri Lanka's culture, parents are committed to support the education, so they will pay the tuition fee. And free education must not be like this, but then it becomes unaccountable. Nobody cares, nobody takes it seriously when given anything free in Sri Lanka. That is the culture, anthropological development of Sri Lankans. So, but for those who are poor, let the government start a scholarship program, not free education. Let them be funded through scholarships based on their merits. That's why I said from grade 1 to 13 there must be exams, scholarship. If they are scoring high, give them a annual support through a scholarship. Accordingly give. If they score less support, like that. Then only they commit, then only everybody start committing. This is the only way. This is what the Gautama Buddha said. Go in the middle path, don't go into any extreme in any issue. So let me discuss about the cost of living, income increase, and the fertilizer matter, and also the electricity problem, and also other food crisis that Sri Lanka has in the next video.